Hey there, my name is Mike Parejo. I'm one of the pastors on staff here at RVCC. Thanks for joining us today as we continue on in our series, Everyday Spirituality for Everyone. And as we kind of start the message today, I want to talk a little bit about two of the more memorable athletic achievements from my younger days. Okay, now, before you get any ideas, like I was by no means a star athlete when I was in my teenage years or anything like that. Like I've always been a good athlete, but never anything like just crazy amazing. But I've had some really fun and memorable experiences, and I just want to talk about two today. And the first one came from when I was a teenager, probably 16 or 17 years old. And it came during the summertime. My family, we had a membership to a local sports club that went by the name Club Sport. Super original there. But Club Sport had everything. It had racquetball courts, tennis courts, basketball courts. It had a health club, full gym, all sorts of stuff. And so I would spend a lot of time there during the summer. And one particular day I'm at Club Sport and I walk by the basketball court, which is usually filled with middle-aged, really sweaty guys with headbands on. I didn't want to have anything to do with it. And I walk by in this one day and it's empty. Nobody's in there. And so for me, being the hardcore introvert that I was, man, that was heaven for me. And so I got in there, grabbed a basketball, and I enjoyed about 15 minutes of just shooting around by myself, being weird, talking to myself, pretending that 3, 2, taking shots, things like that. And after about 15 minutes though, I was kind of bored. I was kind of done. I was going to go do something else. And I'm walking out of the gym to leave, and there's a basketball, and I grab it up off the floor, and I look up, and I'm at the baseline of the basketball court, and so I'm right pretty much underneath the basket, and so I just figured, well, I'll just launch a full court shot, what the heck, and so I rear back, and it's not even a basketball shot. I mean, it's just let me just chuck this thing, and I throw it, and I'm watching, I'm like, hey, that looks like it's got a shot, and I swished it. It no backboard, no rim, just the most ridiculous shot ever, and it just dropped right through. It was absolutely crazy. And I started going crazy. I'm like, I made it! Yes! There was nobody there to celebrate with. So I had made this amazing shot, something that it was just wild, but I couldn't share it with anybody because there was nobody in the gym. And this was decades before TikTok and Instagram would come around, where people would record trick shots to get millions of views or whatever. We were so far before that time, it was ridiculous. So I was the only person that would ever see or remember that shot. So jump ahead a couple years. I'm in college. It's about my junior year of college. And I played tennis in college, but what I really loved is I just loved playing intramural sports with my buddies. I loved getting out there with my friends, and we played intramural football together. And I loved playing football with these guys because my freshman year when we played, we were so bad. We were freshmen and we played this team of seniors, and we lost by a score of 65-0. It was just an embarrassment. And so it was exciting that once we get to our junior and senior year, we started actually playing pretty well and started winning. And one of those years we made it to the playoffs, and we're in this playoff game against another team, and they're also pretty good, and we're in this defensive battle, as in it's 0-0, and there's about 2 minutes to go, and it's the playoffs. So whoever scored first was pretty much going to be able to make it to the next round. And we're trying to march down the field, but we kind of get stuck, and we're about 30 yards out, and what are we going to do? There's no field goals. There was no goal post. It was you had to score a touchdown. And so we get in the huddle, and my quarterback's like, all right, guys, it's Hail Mary time. Just get your butts into the end zone. I'm going to chuck it down there. We're going to see what happens. So as a wide receiver, my only job is okay, run to the end zone, and maybe it'll fall in my lap. We'll see. And the other team obviously knew what we're doing, so all their defenders are playing back. And so my quarterback, hike, falls back and just launches this ball in the air. And it's just kind of dropping down in my general area. Now, if you were to listen to my teammates tell the story of this play, they would tell you that as the ball was coming down, I jumped up at the same time as these two defenders, and as we were rising up, I somehow hung in the air, Michael Jordan style, and as the defenders fell down to the earth, the ball dropped into my hands, and I came down and scored, and we won the game. What actually happened, I think I understand it better because I was there. So The two defenders, as the ball is coming down, they're really excited because they don't have to catch the ball. They just have to knock it down and prevent me from catching it. So they jump up, but they mistimed their jump and they jumped too early. And so they jumped up, and as they were coming back down to earth, that's when I jumped. And so it looked like I was rising up as they were falling, and that's when I caught the ball and scored the touchdown, and we won the game. And that was great and all. But out of the two accomplishments, sinking a full court basketball shot or just timing my jump right and catching a ball, like the basketball shot was far more impressive. And yet it means nothing to me compared to the catch in the football game, because that meant something to our team. That meant something to me and my friends, our community, if you will. And so I'll always remember that with much greater memories. Why am I talking about this? Why am I talking about weird sports events in my life? Well, we're halfway through this series, Everyday Spirituality for Everyone, in which we are exploring a bunch of different kinds of spiritual practices that each and every person can engage in, that we can experience to help us grow in our own spiritual journey. And so last week, we talked about some spiritual practices that have to do with our pursuit of God. What does it mean to pursue God when it comes to spending time reading the Bible and spending time in prayer, as well as some others, okay? Now, reading the Bible and prayer, these things are essential, in our personal journey with God, if we really want to grow in character with Him. I mean, it's great going to church, it's great watching a service online and listening to somebody teach from the Bible, but we have to be able to spend time in the Bible on our own. We have to allow the Holy Spirit to teach us instead of just listening to others. Like, I have to engage personally with the Bible. Sitting in a group of people and listening to other people pray is really good, but I have to engage with God in prayer if I really want to see myself grow. Now, that being said, following Jesus is not something that we do alone. And so today I want to talk about how we can experience spiritual growth, how we can engage in this everyday spirituality by means of engaging in community, as in we practice these things with other people, and we have to be able to do that. In fact, if you remember nothing else from today, I want you to remember this. Discipleship cannot thrive outside of community. Discipleship cannot thrive outside of a community. It's amazing how even a little bit of support from other people can do so much and help us grow in ways that we never thought possible. And so if you have your Bible or the Bible app on your device, if you've got that, I'd love for you to find your way over to Joshua chapter 3. We're going to get there in just a minute, but I want to get you up to speed in terms of what's happened to this point in Joshua chapter 3. And so prior to this, what we've seen is the nation of Israel, the Israelite people, have been wandering the desert for 40 years under the leadership of Moses. And now they are finally about to enter into the promised land. It's actually happening, but they're doing so now under the leadership of this man named Joshua. And so in this section, God is going to be preparing Joshua to send the Israelites into their first major battle at a place called Jericho. And maybe you're familiar with that city of Jericho, or the battle plan that they had, which was really not a battle plan at all. Like, instead of like shooting arrows or catapults or having things like that, like the battle plan was to walk around the city. But that's actually not what we're talking about today. I don't want to talk about the Battle of Jericho. I'm going to talk about how they got to Jericho. At which point you may be thinking like, wait, we're talking about the road trip to get to Jericho now? Like, that sounds pretty boring, actually. And what we're going to see, though, is that this road trip to Jericho is anything but boring. It's truly incredible here. So I'm going to pick up the story, Joshua 3, verse 5. Joshua told the people, "Consecrate yourselves, for tomorrow the Lord will do amazing things among you." And Joshua said to the priests, "Take up the Ark of the Covenant and pass on ahead of the people." So they took it up and went ahead of them. Okay, I want to stop really fast because I love Joshua and his faith here. And what does he say? Tomorrow the Lord will do amazing things. He doesn't know exactly what God is going to do, but he is fully confident that God is going to crush it tomorrow. So whatever it is, get ready. God's going to do awesome things. Sorry, that's an aside point. Let's keep reading verse 7. And the Lord said to Joshua, "Today I will begin to exalt you in the eyes of all Israel, so they may know that I am with you, as I was with Moses. Tell the priests who carry the Ark of the Covenant, when you reach the edge of the Jordan's waters, go and stand in the river." So God's telling Joshua, you're going to take the people to the Jordan River, and you, Joshua, are going to be seen as the people saw Moses. Now keep in mind just the miraculous things that God did through Moses and his brother Aaron. Think about the 10 different plagues that God used Moses to judge the nation of Egypt who were enslaving the people. And then probably even more miraculous than that when they get to the Red Sea. So Pharaoh finally let all of Moses' people go. They get to the Red Sea, but Pharaoh's changed his mind, so he and the army are coming and chasing them down now. So they're stuck between a rock and a wet place. Like what are they going to do? And God uses Moses to part the Red Sea so that the people can go through. And then as the Egyptians go to follow them and hunt them down, then God collapses the waters and just wipes out this army. And so God has done incredible things through Moses. And now he's saying to Joshua, you're going to be seen like Moses was too, which, holy cow. And so now God is asking Joshua to lead the people to this other body of water, the Jordan River. Well, let's keep going, verse 9. Joshua said to the Israelites, "Come here and listen to the words of the Lord your God. This is how you will know that the living God is among you, and that he will certainly drive out before you the Canaanites, Hittites, Hivites, Perizzites, Girgashites, Amorites, and Jebusites. See, the ark of the covenant of the Lord of all the earth will go into the Jordan ahead of you. Now then, choose 12 men from the tribes of Israel, one from each tribe. And as soon as the priests who carried the ark of the Lord of all the earth, set foot in the Jordan, its waters flowing downstream will be cut off and stand up in a heap." I love Joshua. I love his confidence in God. He's just sitting there, God's got this. Like, you guys don't have to stress about it. This land is promised to us. All the people that are there that you're afraid of, he's going to take care of that. You don't have to worry about this. He's going to take care of us. And don't worry about the river. That's nothing compared to the Red Sea, right? But what we need to remember is this, and I didn't think about this until later on where I was studying this passage. Joshua was only one of two people out of 1 million plus Israelites. He was only one of two people that actually was there when God parted the Red Sea. Remember, the Israelites that passed through, they all died in that 40-year period of wandering. It was this new generation that had come up. Nobody but Joshua and this other guy, Caleb, had seen it. And so he had a lot of great confidence, but were the others going to believe it? Because as we're going to see, the Jordan River wasn't something easily crossed. Now, I actually have some unique experience with this. A few months ago, my wife and I went on a trip to Israel. We were there for our wedding anniversary, and we got to see some different sections of the Jordan River. And here's what the Jordan River looked like when we were there. Now, keep in mind, this picture, I took this in the month of July, okay? So it's very dry, 100-degree days, like absolutely brutal heat. And so it's nice, calm river. Doesn't seem like that big of a deal to cross, right? Even if it gets really deep, you can doggy paddle. It's fine. Even if you got stuff to carry, okay, throw it in a wicker basket, doggy paddle and bring your stuff. Even if you have got kids, okay, just throw them on your hip and swim through. It'll be fine. But when the Israelites arrived at the Jordan River, it didn't look like that nice picture that I took. It didn't look like that at all. See, it was springtime when they went. And it was springtime, and so the winter snows that had fallen on Mount Hermon, they had begun to melt. And so all that snow melt had now gone down to the rivers. And so the Jordan River probably looks something more like this. So check that out. How many of you would be really excited to cross that river, okay? And maybe you're thinking oh, that's not that big of a deal. Really? Do you want to cross that with all of your stuff, with your kids? Do you really think that's something that you would be excited to do? Now, if you're going yeah, it's not that big of a deal, clearly you've never been at a river at flood stage. You've never experienced it. So when I lived in Arizona, my family and I lived there about a dozen years. And during the summers, we lived in Tucson, there would be this monsoon season that would happen during the summer. And about 3 o'clock every day, there's these just crazy rainstorms would pass through town and just would dump and dump and dump rain. And because the land was so dry and the water came in so quickly, it would cause these flash floods. Okay, and so we'd have these massive rivers of water just kind of covering roads, and they would shut down roads almost on a daily basis because it wasn't safe to cross. And inevitably, people would think oh, well, I can get my car across, or it can't be that deep, or the water can't be that powerful. And every night on the news, there would be stories of the morons who would try to cross this monsoon flood river before, and you'd see them like sitting on the top of their car hoping to get rescued because their car couldn't get all the way across. I mean, it's crossing, and that was just like, a monsoon flood. This is a massive river flooding here. And so while Joshua knew that God could do it, it still had to sound really ridiculous to some of the other people. So let's read on and let's see what happens starting in verse 14. So when the people broke camp to cross the Jordan, the priests carrying the Ark of the Covenant went ahead of them. Now the Jordan River is at flood stage all during harvest. And yet as soon as the priests who carried the ark reached the Jordan and their feet touched the water's edge, the water from upstream stopped flowing. It piled up in a heap a great distance away at a town called Adam in the vicinity of Zarethan, while the water flowing down to the Sea of Arabah, that is the Dead Sea, was completely cut off. And so the people crossed over opposite Jericho. The priests who carried the Ark of the Covenant of the Lord stopped in the middle of the Jordan and stood on dry ground, while all Israel passed by until the whole nation had completed the crossing on dry ground. I love it. So the priests carrying this ark, like the minute that their sandal touches the water, like the water just dries up. I just imagine like this wall of water like piling up and almost going in reverse. Like I wish I could picture in my mind what that really looked like. But God provides in this way so that as the Ark of the Covenant and the priests are in the middle of the stream, like it's clear and the people have the go that they can go across. But imagine being in that position. Imagine like seeing this miracle, but you still have to get to the other side. And even though you cannot see where the water starts up again, wouldn't you have that nagging feeling in the back of your mind, well, what if we get halfway across and the water comes back? Like there's no way, like we wouldn't have time to get back, and what's going to happen to me? What's going to happen to my kids? I mean, there have to be some people that are wondering that, and there definitely has to be at least a handful of people that are voicing those concerns. Well, what if this happens, Joshua? What if that happens? And I think that's why it's so important that we see that the priests carrying the Ark of the Covenant are going to stay in the middle of this dry riverbed until everybody gets across. You see, the Ark of the Covenant symbolized God himself. God himself would be in the middle of the danger. He went in first, and now it was their opportunity to go in there. And so the people going in there, they knew that they didn't have to do it alone. They knew that they didn't have to do it on their own strength. But most importantly, they were going to do this as a community. Again, verse 17, all Israel passed by until the whole nation completed the crossing. See, God's people went through that dangerous situation together. They did it as a community. They experienced the miraculous together. They needed God to first go before them. They needed Joshua to lead by faith. But ultimately, they needed to take the step of faith together. Again, discipleship cannot thrive outside of community. This wouldn't have worked on an individual basis. It wasn't going to be one thing where you get this 1 million+ people sitting and waiting, and one crazy teenager says I'm going to go for it, and just run across. That's not how it was going to work. They needed to do it together. Again, there's 1 million people plus that need to cross this thing. They had to do it together. And I love it because one of the beautiful aspects of being part of a spiritual community is that you don't have to go through the challenges of life alone. You don't have to do it by yourself. In fact, that's not how God has designed us. He didn't design us to go through the garbage of life alone. He wants us to go through it together so that we can have mutually supportive relationships in this life so that we don't have to endure it alone. That's why if you do a study through the New Testament, there's well over 50 statements that either include the words one another or each other, okay, in terms of how people who are on this journey of discipleship, how we are to treat each other. Things like in Galatians where it says, carry each other's burdens. Okay, don't let somebody do it alone. Help carry that person's burdens. Or in James chapter 5, confess your sins to each other. So these one another statements, these each other statements, we've been designed to support each other in this life. Everyday spirituality takes place in community, And so we can make it through difficult times together, just as we see the Israelites doing. Now, of course, community is not just for the purpose of going through hard times. I mean, that's certainly a benefit so that I don't have to go through hard times alone, but community is also for celebrating together. One of the rhythms that we love to celebrate, that we love to do as a church is to celebrate. We want to celebrate what God has done. Later on in chapter 4, and we're not going to get there, we don't have time. In fact, if you're looking for something to read in your Bible this week, just read the first 6 chapters of Joshua, okay? Like, take a day off, like, maybe you don't start today, maybe you start tomorrow, but read Joshua chapter 1 through 6. Read through that this week and see what God does in this community. It's just absolutely incredible. But what we see later on in chapter 4 is that Joshua calls the leaders of these tribes to go out and to get a stone each, and they're going to get these 12 stones and they're going to create a memorial, because they never want to forget what God did that day at the Jordan River. They wanted to celebrate what God had done. They never wanted to forget it. So in future generations, when people saw those memorial stones and they asked the question, what happened here, that nobody would forget. They'd be able to say, well, this is what God did, and we celebrate what we did, and we're going to continue celebrating what God did on that day. Celebration should be a regular part of our journey with God, and celebration always happens best in community. If you're just celebrating alone, you're pretty much just that guy who sinks the full court shot, but nobody was there to see it, and that's pretty much worthless right there. Discipleship cannot thrive outside of community. It can't. Who is your community that's helping you through the difficult times in life? Who is your community that you join together with to celebrate when God does something amazing? How are you relying on others as you go through this life? If you're already part of a community group, hopefully you're experiencing some of those one another's, okay? How people have taken care of you and looked out for you. Maybe you've been on the receiving end of some of those one another statements, and I just want to encourage you, make sure that you're doing the same for others in that community group. And even better, invite somebody else to be a part of that community. Invite somebody else to enjoy the community that you are experiencing right now. Make sure that you're praying for people. Make sure that you're encouraging others. Make sure that you are showing God's kindness, that you are showing His compassion, His mercy to others. Live out those one another statements. Go outdo each other in the each other statements, okay? And if you are looking for a list of those one another's, we're going to have that on our website, rainierview.org/online. We will have that resource, so you can print off and have all those one another statements, so you can be reminded of the things that we are called to do for one another in community. Maybe you were in a community group at some point, or maybe at a different church you were in a small group or a discipleship group or whatever they call it. There's a million names for them, but maybe you were in a group, but you're not in one now. Maybe you took a season off of it and the season turned into 2 seasons and that turned into 5 years or 10 years, and maybe it's just been a long time. Or maybe you're in a group and it didn't end all that well, and maybe you're even feeling a little bit burned after that. Or maybe you've never experienced a community group at all, and you've never really experienced what it's like trying to live out your faith alongside other people. I want to encourage you to commit to a group this fall. Okay, we've had our community group catalog out for a couple of weeks now, and it's time. It's time to get in a group. It's a 10-week commitment. I know that can sound like a little bit like, 10 weeks, I don't know if I can do that. It's time to find out. It's time to jump into a group. And again, in this group catalog, you can find that at rainierview.org/groups. And so we've got all these groups that you can sign up for. Jump into one for the next 10 weeks. Don't jump into a group for a week or two and say I don't know, you're not going to know after a week or two. Make a commitment to stick with that group of people for 10 weeks and then reassess after that. Now, I know that 10 weeks, that can sound daunting. It can sound scary. Maybe not crossing the River Jordan, kind of scary, but scary nonetheless. But if you're not in a community, it's time to find one. It's time to find one, because your personal discipleship will never thrive unless you are part of a community of believers. People that you can celebrate with during the really good times of life. People that you can lean on during the really hard times of life. People that you can share your own personal journey of discipleship with. People that you can begin experiencing those one another statements with. Be a part of a community and see how your personal relationship with Jesus begins to thrive. Thank you so much for joining us today. We appreciate you checking in. Have an awesome week.